what's going to distinguish the winners from the losers as far as marketing goes? I mean, what's really going to sort of elevate those winners to the top based on what they're doing today?
Yeah, another great question.
Another episode of A Candor Gander. This time around, we were able to bring up a really cool guest. But before we get to introductions, I just want to remind you, feel free to like, comment on this video. We've got Kristian Peter. You may know him from having co-hosted a couple of things with me in the past. Briefly, Kristian, if anyone doesn't know you, maybe a brief introduction.
Hey, I'm Kristian. I've been in Web3 for about 3 years now, since 2020, and got involved with Gala Games back in 2021 when they released Townstar. Ended up buying the founder's node. I'm a Gala Games Gold member as well. Interested to talk to Wasif about what's going on at Gala and all the big moves ahead in the future here.
I love it. No, and great segue here. Wasif, thank you very much for taking some time to meet with us today. You are the senior marketing manager at Gala Games. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think my official title is Senior Manager of Web3 Marketing.
There we go. Senior Manager Web3 Marketing. I love it. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do specifically? And what brought you to Web3?
Yeah, so my background is in influencer marketing. I did that for about 6 years, working at a prominent agency. The whole role revolved around setting up sponsorships for content creators, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, podcasts, etc. And I was directly linking creators to brands and helping to facilitate those deals. I think around the 5-ish year mark, I started to really think to myself, like, hey, I've done a lot of influencer marketing. I've kind of worked with a lot of the creators I wanted to work with. What are kind of next steps for my career? I think it's around this time that I started to learn about NFTs, around 2021. And, obviously I'd been aware of crypto for a long time, but I didn't really want to touch it just because of how much the market fluctuated. But I think when I learned about NFTs, something clicked for me because I'd just spent a whole lot of time in my life playing a lot of video games. I'd already grown accustomed to digital asset ownership in games like World of Warcraft or skins in League of Legends. So the concept of NFTs intrinsically made a lot of sense to me. And I also grew up playing a lot of trading card games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of these games have secondary markets on places like eBay. So I think the understanding of things like rarity values and how that can affect market price and stuff like that, those were all things that kind of were fairly intuitive for me. So I think I got crypto pilled through NFTs. I really started, kind of learning a lot about them more from a video game standpoint than anything else. And my thesis was like blockchain gaming is going to be something that's pretty big over the next couple of years. At the time, we were learning a lot about Axie, and I think that was really big, but there weren't too many other quality games out there. But yeah, I think I was so convicted that I quit my job in influencer marketing. I studied crypto for like 2 months, and then I was able to make the jump to a Web3 metaverse trading card company that was building on Solana. I worked there for 6 months and did a bunch of NFT drops. And from there, I was able to make the jump over to Gala. And I've been here for about a year now.
Yeah, no, and you say a year, but a year in crypto, as we all know, is like 10 years in the real world. It certainly feels that way. I love the fact you mentioned your gaming background sort of influencing your transition into the space. I've often said gaming in general for me helps me understand the crypto space a bit better, or at least the GameFi space. Sort of puts it into perspective. It makes me realize why it's relevant. I get the basic concept of Bitcoin and Ethereum and an intername of any other chain out there, any other token out there, but it isn't until you start talking about the game space and sort of translating some of those Web 2 concepts into Web 3, for me at least, become a bit easier. I'm not a gamer per se, but I've played games like yourself, and really being able to sort of, you know, own your assets, make them your own, and, you know, potentially if you're good enough, you could, you know, turn that into a, you know, into a financial endeavor worth sort of venturing. So it's very much interesting to me the fact that you sort of weave that path together yourself as well, and maybe a lot of other people you're running into, and sort of that's what's landed you into the space. Gala Games, tell me about what you all are doing out there. And I know, Kristian, you're a bit more familiar with Gala and sort of what they're all doing, but tell me about what you're all doing, sort of bridge the Web 2 space into that Web 3 space, sort of bring it all together in a sort of nice package for everyone.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think with Gala, we're more than a games company. We're an entertainment company now. We've got Gala Games, Gala Film, Gala Music. I primarily focus on the game side of things. But, you know, over there, we've got close to 30 plus games in development right now. We've got a few games that are live, like Spider Tanks, Town Star, Grit. Superior is playable as a Web 2 title right now. And yeah, I think, you know, we are taking a lot of our learnings on the game side, and we're now applying them to film and music and building out economic models that are sustainable there as well. In terms of bridging the gap between Web 2 and Web 3, I think we're firm believers in accessibility, right? I think a big challenge with this space right now is that, you know, blockchain it's a technology, and it's fairly convoluted for people to understand right now. I can't explain the blockchain to my mom, for example. And even if I could explain the blockchain to my mom, I don't think she'd be keen to go ahead and set up a wallet to do anything on the blockchain. So that's one of the areas that we're hyper-focused on. I think it's part of the reason we've kind of opened up options for people to pay in fiat. We've opened up options for people to not necessarily have to make wallets right away. More than anything else, to bridge the gap, especially on the game side, we want to have people be able to open up a game, get in there right away, start playing, and then worry about a lot of the blockchain stuff down the line once they've actually gotten hooked into the game. Right now, that's a big thing that's kind of on our minds. We haven't quite gotten to what that seamless first-time user experience looks like, but it's something we're in the process of building out.
I love it. You wrote up a pretty interesting article I read through where you were talking about gamification and the importance of gamification in the space. Any thoughts on gamified Web3 onboarding? I know there's bits and bits of that with things like you know, what Coinbase is doing. But really, you know, I would say that scratches the surface as to what, you know, the space really needs. Any thoughts on your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. That article was about questing, and I've become pretty fascinated with questing recently, just because I think it's a really interesting onboarding tool for new users, right? It's a really great way to bring in a ton of users at scale, give them some kind of a rewards incentive for completing mundane tasks like, you know, following somebody on Twitter, linking to Discord, etc. I think that the reason questing is powerful, it's because the rewards incentive is a very direct and it's immediate, right? You know, if you go ahead and perform a couple of these tasks, we are going to give you X, Y, and Z. And then you can layer on things like learn to earn, right? Which I think is what Coinbase is doing. And I particularly found that fascinating because early on, when I was just first starting to learn about crypto, I still didn't have the confidence to go ahead and go onto Coinbase and, you know, purchase a large sum of crypto because I fundamentally didn't understand what it was, right? So doing a couple of those Coinbase quizzes early on, you know, I didn't realize at the time that I was effectively questing, but, you know, you flip through a couple of slides or there's a small video that plays, they give you some information and they give you a quiz. And if you're able to answer the quiz correctly, then they deposit whatever crypto that you were learning about directly into your account. So that's how I initially did my first, you know, couple of quizzes, learned about a little bit about crypto. And then I think that was really it, right? That pushover point allowed me to then start looking for crypto information on YouTube and start listening to podcasts. And I think it was a really effective onboarding tool. And I think that type of thinking around onboarding, designing quests, designing learn to earn layers on top of quests, I think those are all great ways to really first educate somebody about a given Web3 ecosystem, onboard them in an effective way, and reward those users with crypto that they can immediately start using within the ecosystem.
I think that's great. I'm a Coinbase user myself, and the very first transaction I did on Coinbase, I bought Cardano and kept it on there and thought, okay, all I really want to do is see the number go up. And then I started to learn about yield farming and other things. And then I started to do some of the learn to earn tasks inside of Coinbase. And I still have probably 30 or 40 different tokens in there that I did the 4 or 5 chapter, learn from, and then got a couple of each one of them. So yeah, that was a great way to get people who are crypto native into that. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think the Gala's done a good job. I remember my first, delve into Townstar, where it had that more feel of a Web 2 game to me, kind of like I know that the co-founders are Zynga people, but it had that Farmville feel where you could get in there, you could start playing, you didn't have to own an NFT in order to get town tokens or at that time Gala tokens. You had to have an NFT that allowed you to earn it, but I could go in and play for a couple of hours or a couple of days and not have to worry about like setting up a wallet or doing any of that stuff to begin with. So that was great.
Yeah, and I think the ease of accessibility there is largely because Townstar is a browser-based game. I think a lot of browser-based games really stand to, benefit from any type of streamlining of the user acquisition flow. Just because, you don't have to download anything. You don't have to get anything set up. You generally don't need a spiffy computer that can run things at really high graphics or anything like that. So I think it makes things fundamentally very, very accessible for everyone. And now if you take that a step further, and one of the big focuses for us this year is mobile, I think if you're able to create and build effective Web3 games on mobile, I think that has the largest potential for new user onboarding, just because if you look at the, world from a global standpoint, most people don't have personal computers at home, but a lot of people have cell phones.
Yeah, exactly. Can you remind me again, what was the name of the mobile studio that you guys ended up purchasing? I know that onboarded like 20 mobile titles right into the Gala family as quickly as possible. What was the name of the studio?
So the studio is called Ember Studios, and they've been a pretty fantastic partner for us to work with. They're currently working on a number of our titles, and I think the two that we're really excited about are Dragon Strike and Meow Match.
No, that's and you bring up an interesting concept. Player acquisition, and potentially more importantly, player retention. How do you navigate that, specifically now in the bear market? And what would you say to any other gaming projects out there who are trying to sort of, not just tread water, but sort of succeed past the bear and into the next bull run?
Yeah, I think probably the most intuitive advice I can provide is that your game can't be all about the earning component of it, because if that's all that the game offers, I don't think you're going to have a particularly vibrant user base, right? I think people are much more convicted when they see a real community in place, a really real community of gamers, people that they can relate with. It's a little tough if your entire game and the entire model is reliant upon GameFi, because that generally, once your game has effectively been drained of whatever money that people can extract out of the ecosystem, a lot of those people go away and they go on to new games, right? So in some ways, right, building your title purely around GameFi is a double-edged sword. You're going to be able to attract a lot of new users to your ecosystem, but you're attracting them for the wrong reasons. So I think surviving through the bear really means like building a quality game, having a quality community behind it. And in my view, I think a big part of what that community looks like is to really engage the creators that are part of that ecosystem, people who are creating content, people who are spreading the word effectively, and really empower those folks to do a better job.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the big thing right now for most of the gaming, at least the Web3 gaming side of things, is kind of making their way through this. We saw, so many projects come in the middle of the bull run and have instant success, and kind of mask the fact that they didn't have a true game to begin with. But everybody talks a lot about Web3 AAA gaming and what's going to be the big title to bring, the next million or 100 million users onto, into the Web3 space. I know that you guys are developing Mirandus, and there's a couple of other big titles that are out there. But what are you looking at as being that one shining star that's going to attract people that are otherwise on the sideline right now?
Yeah, I think it can go one of two ways. The first option, which is the more ideal option, is that Web3 comes out with a very, very high quality game that's got a ton of polish, that is really just enjoyable because it's a high quality game and people don't really care about the financial side of it. That is going to really help onboard a lot of new folks into this space. And I think there needs to be a couple of considerations there too, right? If you're looking at the average user who has to think really hard before they make a big purchase, say for a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox or, whatever else that they're going to acquire for that year as their gaming console, to go to this user and say, hey, I really want you to come check out this game, but in order for you to have a meaningful stake in it, you're going to need to buy an NFT that's worth $2,000 or $3,000, right? You're never going to be able to win over those people with a game where, assets are going to cost that much. That's not to say that assets shouldn't cost that much. I think it's really finding the right type of game where, people don't have sticker shock just from seeing it upon first sight. We're all in the Web3 space. We're accustomed to digital assets being valued at astronomical levels, especially during the bull run. But we have to kind of consider that the average person doesn't look at gaming in that way. They don't look at gaming as an investment. They don't look at gaming as something where digital assets should cost as much as they cost in this space. So that would be the first consideration I make, just a very high quality game that really understands the average Web2 user and has mechanisms in place that were built from the ground up to attract those users. The second option of a really big game that could potentially onboard in the next wave of users is one where the earning potential is really high, at least at the outset. Of course, like the stories we heard from Axie Infinity in its heyday, where people in the Philippines were able to quit their day jobs and just play the game for money. Like those are the types of stories that were really just, forcing people to stop and think about oh my God, there's something interesting happening here. How do I potentially get in on this game? I think if we were to create a game that has a really, really sound economy, then that might also really help onboard a lot of users. A lot of these folks are going to be global audiences, as I'd mentioned, in places like, Latin America and Southeast Asia and whatnot. But yeah, that's the other big potential for onboarding a ton of people.
GameFi is very synonymous with the term play to earn. From a marketing perspective, would you say that sort of branding is sort of the same, moniker that pushes people away from the space? Meaning, you've promised me play to earn. I've bought into your project. I'm playing and I'm not earning. I'm losing money. I mean, does that sort of make you think, sort of as and not just Gala Games, but sort of GameFi space in general, maybe there should be this concerted effort to rebrand the space from play to earn to something else?
Yeah, I do think so. I think play to earn, play and earn, both of these terms have kind of taken on a toxic trait, especially outside of the Web3 space. Really, I think anything blockchain related to the average gamer is something that they are not super excited about, and I do think that as an industry, we should make a concerted effort to adequately rebrand things. I think going with the notion of just digital ownership is probably the best way we can talk about things, because as you've said, if you come out the gate talking about things like play to earn and whatnot, when people actually do get into your ecosystem, and if at any point they do start losing money, that builds up a ton of resentment. And that also ties into pricing of things, right? If things are priced at a certain level, then people do go into a game expecting some level of a return on what they're spending within the game. But yeah, that presents a bit of a challenge as well.
Definitely. On the Gala side of things, I mean, I know that we talked about you guys have got Gala Games, you've got Gala Music, you've got Gala Film. I always tried to tell people, and if it was right or wrong, I'm not exactly sure, but the platform for Gala is just unlimited. I mean, basically, there is that whole ownership aspect to it, where you can own different parts of in-game assets, basically, or music assets or film assets or whatever that case may be, which I think is just a great way to put it. On the game side of things, which you're most involved with, would you call Gala Games more like a Steam, or is it a platform that allows independent developers to build games and have Gala be that, that reach, that marketing aspect of it? Or is Gala more of a studio that develops their own games? It's kind of a mix, and it's hard for me to kind of put it into perspective, but maybe you have a better way to do that than I do.
Yeah, I do think that it's a little complicated to really pin us on what we exactly do. I think the best way to describe it is that we are a Web3 publisher, and we also have our own in-house studios. So the in-house studios are developing some of our main titles like Miranda's Last Expedition and The Walking Dead Empires, and then we are also partnered with a few third parties to publish their games like Grit, Spider Tanks, Superior, etc. And in terms of what our aspirations are, I think we're trying to become a hub of all things Web3 entertainment, whether that entails an proper game launcher that other folks can come in and utilize and potentially leverage our platform and ecosystem. That's something that we are also, looking at, but it's not something that's kind of on the docket for the immediate horizon. I think the main goal right now is, hey, we've got a ton of great games that we're hoping to publish. Let's get these games out the door. Let's build out music and film. And then once we have this ecosystem that's really vibrant, that has a quality Web3 audience in it, let's figure out ways that we can build and scale.
Web3 sort of, it's sort of an interesting space, right? It can feel like feast or famine. Certainly when it comes to, financials, right? What would you recommend, any project at this point in time, as far as their marketing efforts, presuming funds are limited as they may be for many projects? I mean, where would you recommend your concerted marketing efforts go? You don't have the millions and billions of dollars sort of, go all in and, hire out, invest it the way you may want to sort of in a bull market. I mean, how are you sort of strategically deploying those funds in a bear?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, definitely experiencing some of that as well. There's belt tightening happening across the industry, and marketing generally gets hit first. I think the area where I primarily focus is on relationships with content creators. So I manage the creator program at Gala, and I also look at business development and partnerships. And I think those are two areas where you can ascertain a ton of value without necessarily having to spend a ton of money. Of course, when we have budgets, I definitely try to allocate it to some of our consistent creators and do what I can to, get them paid. But at the same time, because I try to focus on building good relationships with a lot of our content creators and being a liaison, if you will, between Gala and the creator community. So the way I sometimes look at it, it's like, hey, when I don't have budget, right, how do I create value for content creators? What are they looking for that's going to incentivize them to want to cover a given ecosystem? And I think content creators are looking for a couple of things, obviously money being one of them, but they're also looking for exposure. They're looking for growth. They're looking for collaboration opportunities with fellow content creators, and they're looking for content creation opportunities. So one of the areas that I started to focus on early on was to start doing playtests for our games that were creator exclusive, right? So we generally have one or two big playtests that happen each month. But, in talking to the team, one of the things we kind of landed on is like, hey, before opening it up to the general public, let's actually bring all of our content creators in to actually play the game first, right? So we'll organize a day where I'll try and reach out to all the content creators that I work with. It'll be like a little party, 20, 30 of us all hanging out in Discord, playing games together, joking around. And I think, the opportunity to test a new build of a game, the opportunity to play alongside your friends and potentially engage in some friendly rivalry in times where we've created contests or competitions. These are all things that have, resulted in some really, really great content for Gala. I think that has been something that's worked out quite well. And I think beyond that, just on the partnership side too, right, there's many instances where there are synergistic partnerships between Gala and other organizations. And I think being able to establish those partnerships and then using co-marketing through social media and some of the other channels that we have has generally been a very beneficial way to kind of continue to market ourselves and market our games without needing to necessarily spend a ton of money.
Definitely. Sarge and I just got back last week from 3XP, the 3XP conference in LA, which was fantastic. There was hundreds of game developers and platforms, and they set up an esports stage. And I know that Spider Tanks has been one of your big titles that have come out, and it's kind of got that esports feel to it. With games like Spider Tanks and other types of titles like that, are you guys going to plan to do more types of esports events and tournaments and that type of thing in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was also at 3XP, had a great time. Got to meet a lot of longtime friends and some new folks in the space. Yeah, I think the short answer is we are absolutely looking to do a lot more esports content with Spider Tanks. I think it's designed from the ground up to be an esports 3v3 brawler. But I think where we do have to keep things in consideration is size and scale, right? I'm sure you guys have maybe heard that the entire esports industry is facing a big downturn right now. Just the United States currently does not have a sustainable model for esports. It's far too expensive to run and manage, and a lot of the companies that are trying to focus on esports are losing a ton of money. So, while it was definitely a big part of our roadmap to focus heavily on esports, I think we are doing that, but trying to do it in an ROI positive way. And what I mean by that is similarly, one of the options that keeps coming up for me is to potentially do a lot of work with like big guilds that want to, send their best players with the best items to come and partake and participate. And sometimes that's not always the best, ROI for a tournament, right? Because while these guilds have lots of users, their primary incentive in participating sometimes has a lot more to do with just being paid out and then moving on to the next tournament and the next person that's offering a big prize pool, right? And so I've kind of opted to really, again, double down on the creator ecosystem. And so one of the tournaments that we organized last month was called the Gala Creator Cup, where we had creators form into teams of 3, participate in the tournament, and that actually yielded some of the best content that we've gotten around Spider Tanks. I think it's not necessarily the most competitive play that you're going to see because these content creators are not pro gamers, they're content creators, but definitely made for some really, really entertainment times when people are, playing the game and enjoying themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like at 3XP too, it was kind of a great way to get people involved in Web3 that maybe hadn't been there before, and the Web2 gamer that wanted to experience what Web3 was all about. One of the things that I think that people may or may not know is that Gala's developed their own blockchain in the background, and maybe you could take a couple of minutes just talking about Geary and what that's going to do for Gala long term. I know that everything was originally based on ETH, and now it's now that the Geary chain is up and functioning, and Gala is going to be the token that gets used on it, to the best of my knowledge. Is there some insight you can share on the Geary chain as well?
Not too much that I can share. I think, we're still in the process of unrolling and kind of bringing Geary out into the world. I think the TLDR there is that Ethereum just wasn't fulfilling our needs in terms of the way we wanted to grow and scale, and it made it necessary for us to develop Geary in order for us to be able to do all the things we wanted to do. Now that Geary has been integrated into Spider Tanks and some of our other titles, we're going to continue to build and scale. But yeah, I think more than anything else, Geary just gives us so much more flexibility that we didn't have before.
What's going to distinguish the winners from the losers as far as marketing goes? I mean, what's really going to sort of elevate those winners to the top based on what they're doing today?
Yeah, another great question. I think it's going to require a combination of really solid Web2 games marketing and really solid Web3 marketing as well. And I think it's really why you're starting to see a bit of a delineation in some companies where they're specifically having somebody run point on Web3 marketing, and that's separate from Web2 marketing. What I mean by that is, generally you look at the way games are marketed, right? You have your traditional channels of like Google Ads, using social media platforms to run advertising, working with influencers, content marketing, etc. And you have to do a really great job on all of those areas to remain competitive with other Web2 games and how they're marketing. But I think you also really need to do a good job of engaging the Web3 community as well. And that Web3 community is very specific and at times kind of insular, right? In order to really get on the radar of folks in Web3, you have to be present in places like Twitter, in places like Twitter Spaces. You have to have a presence within the key opinion leaders within the Web3 space, the folks who are big influencers of other folks who are in the Web3 space. I think if you're able to reach those people in an effective way, that's going to be what brings in kind of the big speculative folks who want to discover the next big Web3 title and they want to get in early. I think those folks who are in Web3 and they're specifically looking for that, and they will generally spend an outsized amount of money within an ecosystem relative to the Web2 gamer. But in order for the entire ecosystem to work the way it's intended, you need both, right? You need the big folks who are going to buy those big assets. You need the general users who want to play the game and maybe dabble a little bit in the crypto and NFT side of things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Any, give you an opportunity to sort of use this platform, anything you care to share sort of on your agenda of things you've worked on, any parting words, Wasif, for us in the audience?
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's been a blessing to have worked at a company like Gala where we're working on such high quality titles. I'm super proud of all the great work that our team has done. I think more than anything else, if you're part of the Gala community, we're really excited to continue to grow our ecosystem with you, continue to bring out really great games, music, and film. And really, I know it's a rough time in crypto right now, but these are really the moments that kind of separate the companies that are going to survive and stick around long term from the others. And I think we're really well situated for that. So we're really excited to continue building over the upcoming months and stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of great content coming from us soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Wasif. For myself, Kristian, thank you all for tuning in, watching. We hope to bring you more exciting content like this